Welcome to She's So Tiny YouTube page for my first video. Due to all of the questions about how do I transfer my pattern markings onto my fabric, I decided to do a long form video so I can give you guys all of those details and answer all of those questions for you. So let's get started. All right, so there's a couple of things that I use whenever I'm transferring marks. I like a pattern weight so I can keep the pattern down. I don't want to pin my pattern to my fabric once I've cut it out because I'm going to need to be able to move the pattern around a little bit. I'm going to use a clear ruler. I use this sometimes. And then I like two different types of marking tools. I'm gonna mark my darts with my Friction heat evaporating, and I'm gonna mark the ones that need to stay on until I'm ready to do like the buttons or the center front, the marks that need to be on there a little bit longer. I'm gonna mark it with my water soluble pen. I'm also gonna need some pens, and I'm gonna need a set of embroidery scissors. So I like to lay everything out nice and flat. I take my pen. I like to mark my darts first. Those are the largest things I'm going to need to mark on here. So I'm going to mark those first. I'm going to mark them by just putting the pen until it goes all the way through into my fabric. I'm going to take my Friction pen. I'm going to flip this up. And I'm going to make a little mark. Lay it down. Making sure I don't move my pattern around. Make my next mark. Here. Also, when I start to transfer my marks, I always make sure that I do the marks on the wrong side of the fabric, the side of the fabric that you're not going to see when the garment's worn. Not because the marks are on there, because these marks are going to come off before I wear this garment, but because when I need to sew my darts, I don't want to have to figure it out from the wrong side of the fabric. I want it to be where I'm going to need to sew it, which will be the inside. So again, I'm going to just go through and I'm just marking. Trying to make sure it's my pattern weights here to make sure I don't slide this around too much. Some people will even, I see, cut out these darts and just trace them as they're cut out. It depends for me. If it's a pattern that I know I can reprint, sometimes I'll do that. Typically these vintage patterns, I treasure them a lot, so I don't like to cut into them if I can help it. So now I'm gonna go around and I'm gonna mark all of these little notches that I have. And now I'm going to take my water soluble marker and I'm going to mark my center front here. Off. I'm going to mark where my button goes. I'm going to make a little dash there. I'm going to mark the bottom one. I'm also going to mark the center front down here. I also have a clip up here. This pattern has a lot of little details to it. So I want to make sure that I get all of them marked. So whenever I go to make it and sew it all together, that I know I'm not going to be confused about where something goes or where something gets connected. So now that I have everything marked that I feel like needs to be marked before I take my pattern off, I look everything through again. I know I got my darts marked. I know I got my clips marked. Or my notches marked. I've got my clip marked here. I've got my center front, my buttonhole, my other center front. Everything looks like it's marked. So now I'm gonna pull this off. So as you can see, it just looks like I got a bunch of tiny dots all over my fabric. So I'm gonna go back through. I'm gonna just darken these up so you guys can see them a little bit better. These were the marks that I made, those little dots that I made for my darts. I want to make sure that I can see my dots. I've got all of my little dashes here from my notches. Now what I'm gonna do for these darts is I'm gonna line up, and I'm gonna just do them one at a time. Some people will go all the way down. I like to be very precise with mine. I tend to be a very particular sewist, so I like to make sure that everything's nice and straight and I don't have to go back and redo it again. So I'm gonna mark my top dot to my second one, making sure everything's staying nice and straight. My second one to my third one. And this one all the way down. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Some darts have a bit of a curve to them, so when you're doing those, just make sure that you pay attention to those. I would typically use a French curve, which I'm happy to do in a separate video for you guys if you would like to see how to use a French curve on rounded darts or a fisheye dart. There's just a lot of different types of darts. This one's pretty straightforward, just a good bust dart and then a little waist dart here at the bottom. Very basic. This is a very blousey dress, so it's not super fitted. So I've marked these, and now I'm going to take my little embroidery scissors and I'm going to actually go through and clip, because whenever I go to sew these darts and then I press them, I know that these marks are going to stay because these are my water soluble marks, but these are going to go away. So I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to take just the nose of my scissors and I'm just going to give a little clip right where those were. Not super deep. Sometimes I'll even go in and clip the legs of the darts, just depending. I've made this pattern a couple of times, so I won't do it this time. But the first time I made it, I did make sure that I clipped my dart legs too. It kind of helps with lining them up. So I know that this was my buttonhole earlier. I'm just going to kind of line up relatively the center of those just so I can make sure that I'm reminded that that's my buttonhole that I'm going to need. So I did mark this. This fabric doesn't have a right side or a wrong side. So whenever I do this, I just want to make sure that I have a left side and a right side and not a right side and a right side or a left side and a left side. So with this one, I'm just going to mark an R for right. And then whenever I go to do my other side, I'm actually going to flip it where it's facing the other direction. And then I'm going to take my pattern and I'm going to put it face down because I need two mirrored pieces. I don't need two lefts and two rights. I want it to be mirrored. So now I'm going to do everything that I just did on my first piece. I'm going to do the same on this piece. So I'm just going to pattern weight it down. I'm going to go through and stick a little pin in and make sure I've got all of these marks. And then by the time I'm done, I should have two pieces that will face each other like this. So when I sew them together, I have a left and a right. So I'll mark that one with a left. If you have fabric that has a right side and a wrong side, you won't have to worry about that as much, but it's always better to mark and remember than forget and then be confused later. So the back piece, kind of similar. So the back piece, remember we cut it on fold, or this particular one, we cut it on a fold. Whenever I press things to cut them, I will give it a good, nice hard press on that fold so I know that that's going to be my center back. So whenever I go to do my markings here, I'm going to line up that center back or that fold line right up to my fabric. Find my pattern weight, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the front of my bodice. I'm going to go through and I'm going to mark everything accordingly with my markers and my pens. And then, because it's two-sided, we're then going to flip the pattern piece over, lining up that fold line again and just making sure that everything lands where it needs to land. and then I would pattern weight this down, and I would also mark all of these again. So there are different ways, there's hundreds of ways to transfer your pattern markings onto your fabric. This is the way that I particularly like to do it. There could be easier ways, there's harder ways. This is just the way that I've always done it. This is the way that works well for me. And hopefully this kind of gives you guys a little bit better idea of how to do it, and it helps you guys out with patterns and transferring all of your markings. I'm Mary McCleary. Please follow me for more tips.